Folklore is local, folklore is regional, folklore originates and thrives in the country of its origin. The current theories or the theories that can be three-day international folklore conference is actually part of a project upon which Bangla Academy has we are investigating. We hope this International Folklore Conference will one of the most distinguished folklorists in the world today, and he happens to be my mentor. And Ignacio, would you please stand up for a while? Please give a hand. Professor Ulubak is from Estonia. Professor Christian Nagri from Sweden. Professor Jawaharlal Handu from India. Professor Margaret Mills from the United States of America. Professor Frank Joe Moram is yet to arrive here. I hope he is in the internet in the airport today. He missed his connecting flight yesterday, so he could not arrive here yesterday. Professor Dr. William Westerman. He is also from the United States. Miss Ishita Halder, are you here? And we have two delegates from France. They are not here today. Hopefully they will be here in the evening, so we'll introduce them to you the next day. So in this, I now request Professor Henry Glassie to deliver his keynote speech.
Honor. But I must admit that my real pleasure is that I've spent very much time in Bangladesh. I love Bangladesh, and I have many very dear friends here. And so that being able to see them has made it already for me a wonderful visit. Almost makes you feel famous, doesn't it? All this apparatus. But here's what I wish to say to you. Folklore is a human universal. It appears whenever creative energy, every child, every baby boy and girl is born creative. To use the language of the American Revolution, endowed by their creators, they're capable of abstracting, organizing, capable of making. To say, I think, therefore I am, is way too abstract. Which, the person who makes a wonderful dinner, the person who makes a beautiful pot, who carves a piece of wood, who raised by genetics into the body. At the same time that everybody is born creative, everybody is born into a social association. That social association is initially the matter of a social set of associations. To say it simply then, so long as there are human beings in every community, in every individual, innate creativity chooses. Folklor conference in Rajasthan. I said it then, I affirm it now, that folklore is now in the hands of people from Asia. For better, I'm certain. So folklore will be studied in the 21st century in relation to preservation and cultural autonomy. This folklore will be studied in relation to the high-tech neo-colonial expansion of greed called globalization. I see clear evidence in Turkey at the west. I see clear evidence in Japan and China on the east. And I see the most impressive evidence right here in Bangladesh. The fact that Shamsuzzaman Khan has established a program of folklore recording that puts a person in every one of the 64 districts of Bangladesh. That's exactly the kind of movement that will make the 21st century the Asian century of folklore study. Ireland, like Bangladesh, endured the horrible ordeal of British imperialism. Ireland, like Bangladesh, had a state that was developed out of a heroic revolution in which a language movement played a great part. In Ireland, and I'm illustrating the progressive scientific development of the study of folklore, in Ireland by 1789, a great folklorist named Charlotte Brooke, who is not normally even remembered, largely because of gender prejudice, Charlotte Brooke articulated a clear argument that folk poetry needed to be recorded very precisely in the words of the people who spoke or sang that poetry. Folk poetry then, by the end of the 18th century, was understood as something deserving of very precise and exact recording. The recording of stories remained a problem in the 1820s, but he had no model for the correct presentation of those stories. Most of them he remembered. He heard a story, remembered it, and rewrote it is to falsify the reality of the presentation of a story. But Crofton Croker was wise enough, though a very young man, to think that maybe another possibility was to record the stories in the exact words spoken by the narrator. He presented a couple of stories in 1828 in that fashion. By the end of the century, that had become the norm. By the end of the century, Douglas Hyde in Ireland, Franz Boas in America, were accurately and impeccably recording the texts of stories. The precise recording of oral literature, of poems, and of stories became then in Ireland a resource. It was first of all a resource for artistic creation. William Butler Yeats, the great friend of Bengal's Rabindranath Tagore, like Tagore, collected stories, collected poems, understood the traditions of the people, and alerted by the revolutionary movement of Romanticism, he was able to write among the very first modern poems. Tagore and Yeats joined in developing modernism. Modernism's essence is folklore. Without folklore, there would have been no modernist movement. You doubt that, but it's in every art true. Corbusier in architecture, Kandinsky in painting, Singh in poetry, Bartok in music. Every one of the people who invented the world that we still inhabit were people who attended first and foremost to the thing we call folklore. Folklore was a resource, is a resource for artistic creation, but it was also a resource for political action. When the Irish Republic was founded, it was founded on the basis of a revolution that was mounted by members of a language movement. Members of a language movement who were English professors, who were poets, who were enthusiasts of traditional music, not at all the kind of people you imagine to establish a revolution, to establish a state, and yet these young, delicate, intellectual men went out and sacrificed themselves. The very last memo that they wrote said that out of our blood will flower a new nation. That happened in Ireland, it happened in Bangladesh. In the new Irish state that was founded on that flow of blood, on the killing of James Connolly, in the new Irish state that was founded, William Butler Yeats was a senator in the government. The president of Ireland was Douglas Hyde. That is, how can you imagine peripheral folklore to supply the president of a nation? But Hyde, the founder of the Gaelic League, the founder of the language movement of Ireland, Hyde, who spent all of his extra time recording stories from the countryside, Hyde was the president of Ireland. In an early act, the Irish Republic founded the Irish Folklore Commission. The purpose of the Irish Folklore Commission was to supply to artists, supply to political thinkers, the great wealth of the tradition. The organization was exactly the kind of organization that Shamsuzzaman and Khan has established for Bangladesh. That is to say, every province had a professional full-time collector. The person in that province then made connections to local people. So, here in Mymensingh, you have Shafiqur Rahman Chowdhury, my great pal, and he makes connections, of course, with the local people, like Mr. Bayati, who can supply it. That connection made the energies. It made the energy. There were portable recording devices anywhere in the world. They were applied in Ireland. The very first portable recording devices were used. The result of that work was a treasury, 38,000 folk tales. And the exact recording of the traditions of the people has then been the motive force for genuine progress in folklore. Theories come, theories go. But I'd like to say to you that there's no reason for you necessarily to read Del Hymes, the man who invented or first articulated that theory. No reason certainly for you a performance. Is a theory that's very general in the world. It abides, for example, in the general principles that govern the creations of Muslim artisans. My friends, makers of pots, makers of copper vessels, makers of furniture. My friends who are Muslim artisans have a few simple statements to provide you with an understanding of the theory of performance. They say God is beautiful and loves beauty. Therefore, necessarily in dedicated labor, the artisans make beautiful things because their creativity shadows weakly, but shadows nonetheless the will of God. God is love, they say, and out of love they work. Out of love they create, and out of love they make things that other people need. Through their work, the artisans, I'm not talking about college graduates, I'm talking about hard-working people over in Shinzira. The artisans aim to bind the society together. Effectively, have to be exact. They have to be correct. We can't fail them by failing to record what they do precisely. But the precise recording of creations is only the very first step in a complicated process. Inevitably, the first step leads to a second and a third and a fourth. And all of those steps are necessary if we are to understand the creations of the people whose work our job is to honor. So land, for example, in Kushtia, and find there the bowels singing. But if we record one song or two or 8, it won't be enough, because that recording will only provide us with a text that we can barbarize in our own spreading of meaning. The songs that they sing will almost all of them be from Lalan Shah. Lalan Shah was born at the time of the American Revolution and lived through the Victorian era. The songs that he sings are for us simply Sufi, but it's a whole lot more complicated than that. I've been there at the Sema for Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi in Konya. I've circled, I've thought, I've heard. I've listened as my friends, the Turkish artisans, repeat always and forever, Gel Gel, come, come. Whoever you are, fire worshiper, if you've broken your vow 1,000 times, come, come, Gel Gel, come. Ours is not the portal of despair. Ours is the entry to heaven. Lalan Shah, in his song sung today by the bowels of Kushtia, quotes that line directly. In quoting that line, what he does is to acknowledge first that there is no difference, no tension whatsoever between a Sufi view of the world and an Orthodox Islam. That one accepts an Orthodox Islam and then explores its inclusive dimensions that allow for a fullness of theological understanding. In universalizing that understanding, Lalan Shah is happy to call God Allah, happy to call God Hari. He's happy to say in proper Muslim fashion that God has no form, and then to say God appears to his eye like the beautiful body of Krishna. He's perfectly willing to accept the proposition of reincarnation, which is heterodox in Islam, because what one would do in a sequence of reincarnations is ultimately be reincarnated in such a body that would be able to follow the miracle that is the Prophet Muhammad. Those songs are laced together by a whole series of metaphors. Water is life, water is faith. The world is a prison, sounds like the Buddha. The world is a home. The body is a cage. The soul is a bird, flapping, trying to get out of that cage. The first thing that we would say in recording those songs is from them we begin to get a repertory of possibility, a series of statements. They become terrifically useful for us in that repertory because comparing them with all the published versions from Lalan Shah, we can see changes over time, which is an interesting fact, but more importantly, we can see which of the songs from the past are interesting to preserve in the present. That is, they're acting in exactly the 21st century mood of preservation as being a great responsibility. The first question is, what? The answer is texts. The texts form into a repertory. The repertory begins to guide us toward an understanding of what is believed, not by Lalan Shah, but by the singers today who would sing the songs of Lalan. The second question is, where and how? So we record the songs, but the second thing we have to record is the context of creation. There's a tomb, the Mazar of Lalan Shah. Next to it, there's a village of bamboo and thatch. In that village, people gather. These are the singers of the songs. When they gather at home, when they gather in informal settings, what do you find? Not a few people will occasionally accompany with musical instruments, and occasionally they won't. Also, other people are perfectly willing to interrupt a song with act, making certain that creativity occurs and that preservation occurs. So the first is the context of creation. Where are we? On the banks of a river in Kushtia. How is performance done? It's done in this informal to Lalan Shah and begin to tell me naturally her view of his biography. It filters through daily life and becomes a part of they rehearsed, they worked things out, nobody interrupted the text for being wrong, instead they were making a presentation to the world, and not only that, their repertory was expanded. They sang not only the songs of Lalan, they sang kirtan. They sang songs of the love of Radha and Krishna. They expanded the repertory to other spiritual songs that they thought would be entertaining. That was a part of their consumption of what had happened on those casual nights in the bamboo and thatched village that's next to the Bazaar of Lalan Shah. They pulled out of that experience the right to perform and were given the right to perform in a formal context, and their performance was quite different. So how would you say these songs are performed? I would say they're performed in many ways. Milal, for example, enjoys sitting in the bazaar himself with his harmonium and singing back to the tune of Lalan Shah, the songs of Lalan Shah. So that's the third thing that needs to be recorded. That is to say, the context of consumption. What is the consequence of the existence? That is the answer to the question, who? We've answered the question, what texts? Where and how? What's the result? Now the three, but rather on the assumption that I'm not after homogeneity. I want to know what is the diversity? What is the diversity in the reality of these songs? So I asked people for their view of the history of the tune, the history of Lalan Shah, the history of the bowels. And then I want to know who they are in particular. So I would understand that Ladar Shah, a leader of the bowels, would have one view of the history, one view of the meanings. That Anjali Ghosh was a Hindu woman, that Bilal Karim was a Muslim man, would describe differently the meanings to them of these poems. But ultimately you understand that what I'm after is a personal view of meaning. I'm after a personal product of culture. Here's what I've said with one simple example, that example of the bowels and Kushtia. That all of our recording is done in a pattern of four. The first thing that we record is a text, but the text belongs to a repertory. Ultimately, that will lead us to the folkloristic proposition of structural theory. The second is the context of creation. What is the setting? What is the process of making these things happen? That's the folkloristic theory of performance. The third is the context of consumption. I'm interested in what is the process of reception? What is the process of reuse? That's the folkloristic theory of function. The preservation, it will be about recording as providing the information that can provide from the West of not more.
In this country, the plan of preparing a collection of 64 volumes to cover the contemporary situation in areas of Bangladesh. That's a great project. And we know folklore lives on the grassroots as vernacular creativity expressed in tradition-bound forms. But at the moment when the analytic mind of a scholar, what we're doing in classrooms with our students, and this takes me back a couple of days in Tartu, when we had the last class. The class is called International Folkloristics. Well, it is a big success among our international students. We have students from Japan, from China, from Italy, from Russia, from Canada, from Estonia, of course. And the last class was about a very important concept for us, about the concept of identity. And discussing the concept, of course, we read us, it is open. There are multiple identities, and identity formation is very much a part of communication, of dialogue. In order to understand ourselves, we need to understand the others. We need to be in contact with them. And also in order to understand the folklore and traditions of our own traditions. And this requires communication and developing the conceptual language of international folkloristics. Identity formation is to a great extent a verbal process. It's an expressive job. And it also happens among us folklorists. We are carriers of certain verbal traditions, not only the theories, concepts that we share, but we also tell our stories, our narratives. We talk about the biographies of ourselves, of our discipline. And well, since a long time, there has been this view among folklorists that folklore is disappearing, it is declining. We have to do the work of being the saviors of lost songs, lost folk tales, to record them, write them down. That's this paradigm of loss, or what Alan Dundes called the evolutionary premise in folklore scholarship. Something that I have noted during the last 5-10 years, this old discourse of the loss, and we have very much come over this by now, but it has got a kind of parallel, a shadow discourse in the academy about the decline of folkloristics as a discipline. And it's very much kind of belief narrative, just told as a belief narrative is told, just giving the statement, folkloristics disappearing, and then some evidence is brought. Well, there was a chair that was closed down, there was a program that was closed down. You hear it very often in Europe among the elderly colleagues who sometimes believe that they represent the last generation of folklorists. Well, it's a folklore. Well, this doesn't correspond to realities. So much is happening in international folkloristics. There are new programs being established in India, in many other countries. A very good example of the thriving of folkloristics is the very conference here, organized by colleagues from Bangladesh. In the middle of May, we shall have been in Tartu, the third international conference of young folklorists. About 30 young people from different countries, around 12 countries, will come to give papers. So certainly, folkloristics has a future. We are not the last generations of folklorists. The next generations of folklorists have not been born yet, and the 21st century is definitely the century of folkloristics. And we are here grateful to the organizers of this conference, Professor Shamsuzzaman Khan, Professor Firoz Mahmood, and the team for bringing us all together, having the chance to discuss, to meet each other, and wishing everybody an excellent conference. Thank you.
Now, Professor Emeritus Shamsuzzaman, the chief guest, will speak.
Henry Grassi, Professor, good morning to all of you. I'm the right person in the wrong place. I'm not a folklorist. I happen to be the president of the Bangla Academy, and my friends are just to accommodate me in all the big events that they organize, whether I fit in or not. That is why I have been made a guest at my own institution. But my ignorance of folklore, people became quite conscious and started taking interest in folklore. The Bangla Academy has its own program related to the folklore, its collection, preservation, and publication. Those of you who are experts will, I hope, have time to look at what we are doing here and to advise us how to go about it. we have had some generous grants to be able to. So I think the Bangla Academy has started in a small way. Its work on the folklore, which will be of interest to all. But the problem, but I hope that what we are doing will ultimately lead us to that point. Welcome you again. We are going through a turbulent time for folklore. But I hope that this turbulence will see for yourself the Bengali New Year celebration that we legitimately take.
Ram Khan, Director General Bangla Academy, the chairperson of this event, will deliver a speech.
Sir Emeritus Dr. Ansulaman, distinguished folklore scholars of USA, Estonia, Sweden, India, and Bangladesh, folklore collectors and coordinators of different districts, fellow members of the intellectual community, my colleagues at the Bangla Academy, ladies and gentlemen. We are now at the back end of this wonderful session. A supporter of Lalon Shah and his philosophy and the role Lalon Shah's songs are now playing in shaping and sharpening our identity, particularly cultural identity. In a secular state, this formation is very interesting for us, and we also congratulate again Mr. Henry for his wonderful efforts. And he came here only yesterday, day before yesterday perhaps, and he rushed to his field areas, particularly in Sabar, Dhamrai, Kakranan, and other areas. He traveled all the way by a microbus, and it was delayed for 5 hours in street while he was returning to Dhaka. So he took all these troubles for studying folklore repertoire, particularly the folk art specimens of Bangladesh in detail and in depth. And Professor Ulubak is also one of the outstanding folklore scholars of the world. He was the former president of the International Folk Narrative Society. So his presence and the presence of Professor Henry Glassy, Professor Handru, Handru is also a good friend of ours, an old friend, and Professor Margaret Beale. She also did field work in Bangladesh during 90s, and she also visited some local areas, localities and communities in Bangladesh to study the various in a village named Ita. Some local people were so hospitable that he might be blessed to extend to all of you my hearty welcome to the University USA, Professor Margaret Meads of Ohio State University USA, Dr. Pierre Allen Bon, a super expert on 15, yes, on 15. And I am told by Lubna Moniam, who is sitting there, that their troupe is a wonderful troupe. Their performance is perhaps one of the best she saw during her career in folklore scholarship. I also pay my homage. I should not forget that I must say something more, because I also pay my homage to Professor Mohammad Mansuruddin, Professor Aaron Dundes of University of California, Berkeley, and Professor Hanko, former director of Nordic Institute of Folklore, Finland, who were our faculty during our intensive folklore workshops during 80s and 90s of the last century. And in fact, they have tried to strengthen and modernize our folklore in line with the international folklore scholarship. So I must say a few words for them and pay my homage to them with my respect for them, those great souls. All of this great souls helps us immensely in our attempt to modernize folklore scholarship in Bangladesh. However, the folklore research updating program of 1980s included among our folklore in other components folklore, a training workshop with an international faculty. Fortunately, 3 members of the faculty are now present today. Henry Glassy is here, Professor Handu is here, and Professor Margaret Mills is also here. I thank them very much for kindly attending this wonderful session, and hopefully their deliberations during the sessions, upcoming sessions, the young, energetic scholars and collectors of folklore around the country will be benefited from their speeches and lectures. The main objective of those workshops were to create and consolidate genuine interest and new awareness of methodological folklore work among grassroots level field workers, mid-level researchers, and administrative personnel to evaluate folklore-related programs in our national cultural arena and to build up folklore studies as an intellectual and academic discipline. Folklore is very vital in our cultural setting, but a solid academic discipline is still in the process of making. Our universities are still reluctant to offer courses in their curriculum. Only one university offers courses, but the infrastructure of serious and international standard studies has yet. Bangla Academy has embarked upon a 3-year-long folklore development program that includes on every district of Bangladesh, highlighting the present state of folklore. This is a massive task. This type of work has never been done in Bangladesh for each district. Some of them had been trained during our successive training workshops in 80s and 90s of the last century. Both the old ones and the new selectees have been trained in their regions this time in Rajshahi University campus, and finally they have been trained in Dhaka twice with a gap of several months. These projects include an international part with the objective of that part. We have organized this international conference to expose our trainees to international folklore scholarship. They will meet and exchange views and discuss their modality of work with the foreign scholars, and they will also exchange between themselves about their programs and how to publish their works in a very standard form. In this respect, Professor Henry Glassy advised me yesterday that you should also include at least 10 pages of appendixes or a short introduction of the program in English. This will help the outside scholars to know your folklore better, and those who are interested in folklore Bangladesh will try to learn Bangla even to read the manuscript in its original form. I thank you very much, Henry, for this wonderful advice. Hopefully, we will try to include a chapter to expose our main works on folklore in Bangladesh. Hopefully, this conference will be fruitful and help strengthen our cultural studies particularly folklore research in particular. With these few words, I again thank you very much for kindly attending this wonderful session, and I also expect the intellectuals and folklore scholars of Bangladesh to exchange views during their stay in Bangladesh. That will help us immensely, and we will exchange opinions on the model, how to innovate a model for scholarship in Bangla folklore. We know that the Western scholars are now following the synchronic method of study of folklore. That will not help us to reveal the inner meaning, symbols and tastes of our folklore, because our folklore is otherwise significant. We have a long history, and our folklore elements are totally interlinked with the cultural development of the country, which was reflected in the keynote paper by Henry today. So, how to use both the techniques in our performance studies, both the synchronic and diachronic studies. I will request the foreign scholars to discuss this problem with our new scholars and collectors, and that will help them immensely. With these few words, I thank you again, and I request all of you to have lunch with us, and right now we will enjoy our tea break. Thank you. Do you like to enjoy it here, or we will go outside for the dhol and other folk instruments? Outside or here?
We'll go for refreshments, and while we have our refreshment, we'll enjoy playing of folk instruments at the same time. Thank you very much for your presence.